In this movie, I'll show you how to open an image file inside Photoshop just by double-clicking on its thumbnail here in the Macintosh Finder. If you're working on a PC, go ahead and skip to the next movie. Now, the reason I lead with this topic is because it used to be far and away my number one tech support question. And so what I imagine might happen is that a student was working with one of my exercise files, went ahead and double-clicked on it, and the file opened in totally the wrong program. For example, in this case, I'm working inside Apple's Preview utility, which allows you to open images and PDF files, as well as mark them up and crop them. And while that's all very well and good, it's not even a fraction of what you can do inside Photoshop. And obviously, if you're not working inside Photoshop, you're not going to be able to do all the cool things that I'm showing you. And so I'll just go ahead and close this window. Now, it is potentially confusing because Photoshop supports so many file formats. If you include all the raw digital camera formats, Photoshop supports more than 50 image file formats in all. Now, we're not going to be looking at all those formats. We'll just be looking at the most common ones. And so here I am looking at the contents of the O1 Open folder, which is available to those of you who have access to my exercise files. Notice that I'm looking at the files in the icon view, in which case you can go ahead and scale these thumbnails using this little slider. Now notice, in addition to this file here, puffins.dng, which we'll be looking at in a future movie, we've got 4 welcome files: welcome.jpg, welcome.png, welcome.psd, and welcome.tiff. Now, for some reason you're not seeing those extensions, then what you want to do is go to the Finder menu and choose the Preferences command, and then click on the advanced icon and turn on this checkbox, Show All File Name Extensions, at which point you can go ahead and close that window. All right, now the specific application in which a file opens is generally dependent upon its format. And so, for example, this TIFF file right here might open in a different application on your system than it does on mine. In my case, if I double-click on this TIFF file, it's going to open inside Photoshop. And I know that's the case because I can see the word Photoshop up here in the title bar. I also have a Photoshop menu in the top left corner of the screen. Now, if you see Photoshop open in a small floating window, as is the case for me, then you just want to go ahead and click on this plus sign in the top left corner in order to expand it. You also want to be able to see the Layers panel. Notice that we're seeing a Layers tab at this point, but we're not actually seeing the panel, which is a problem because the Layers panel is far and away the most important panel in all of Photoshop. It's where you do an enormous amount of work. In which case, here's what I want you to do. Right-click on the word Learn right there on the Learn tab and choose Close in order to close that panel. Now, if you ever want to bring that panel back, all you have to do is go to the Window menu and choose the Learn command. But I'm here to tell you, if you stick with this course, I'm going to tell you everything you need to know. All right, so I'll just go ahead and escape out of there. And then I'll click on the Layers tab in order to expand it so that we can see all our layers. In the case of this file, we don't have any layer. All we have is the flat background, which technically is not a layer. It's just a flat image file all by itself. Now go ahead and click on the Adjustments tab for a moment, and then you should be able to make the panels narrower by dragging this vertical bar right here. You can also make the color panel smaller if you like. And now what I'm going to do is switch back to the Libraries panel and double-click on its tab in order to collapse it so we have even more room for layers. All right, now I'm going to zoom in, which you can do just by pressing Command+, like so that we can see the image nice and large on screen. All right, but here's the thing. What if what I just did didn't work on your computer? What if you double-clicked on that TIFF file and it opened inside Preview once again, or some other program? And here's what you do. I'm going to go up to the Photoshop menu and choose Hide Photoshop so I can return to that folder. And you saw before, when I double-clicked on the JPEG file, it opened in Preview. The same is going to be true for this PNG file. So if I double-click on it, we see it open inside Preview once again. Not what I want. So what do I do to solve that problem? Well, I happen to know that both JPEG and PNG on this particular system are set up to open in Preview. So I'm just going to marquee both of them like so. And then I'll go up to the File menu and choose Get Info, or you have that handy keyboard shortcut of Command-I for Info once again. And you should see 2 windows, one for each file. All right, now the region we want is this area right here. Notice Open With. I'll go ahead and click on that little so-called twirly triangle in order to twirl it open like so. Notice that it's already open over here in the right-hand window. And I'm going to change this option to the most recent version of Photoshop that's available on this machine, which happens to be Photoshop 2020. If you're working in Photoshop 2025 or something like that, then you would go ahead and choose that instead. Then you want to click Change All, that Change All button right there, and then click Continue. All right, now just to test that things are going to work, I'll go ahead and close that window, and I'll double click on the JPEG file by itself, and notice that it opens up in Photoshop as well. Other ways to recognize Photoshop, by the way, are this vertical toolbar over here on the left side of the screen. We have this horizontal options bar up at the top of the screen, and then we have these panels, including the layers panel, over here on the right. All right, so I'll return to the Photoshop menu and choose Hide Photoshop. And now we want to do the same thing for that ping file. So I'll just go ahead and click on that second window, and I'll change Open With to the most recent version of Photoshop. And I'll go ahead and click Change All, after which I will click Continue to make sure Photoshop opens all ping files. And then I'll just go ahead and close that window like so. And I will now double click on that ping file in order to open it up inside Photoshop. Now, you may wonder, what are these file formats and why are these the most common ones that you'll be working with when you're working inside Photoshop? Well, this first guy right here is a JPEG file. JPEG is a compressed file format. It uses lossy compression in order to keep down the file size, and it's great for flat photographic images. PNG is also great for photographs as well as designs, does not apply lossy compression, and it is very common on the web and for mobile devices. Over here, we've got TIFF, which is traditionally a print production format, owned by Adobe, by the way. And then we've got PSD, which stands for Photoshop Document, and it is most commonly used for layered files. So JPEG files are always flat, no layers. PNG files can have translucency associated with them, but not really layers. TIFF files can contain layers. Most people don't use it for that purpose, whereas when you're saving your layered documents, you want to use PSD. Now, we'll be discussing these file formats in more detail when we discuss saving in a future chapter, but that's what's going on for now. All right, so the only file we haven't opened up is the PSD file. I'm going to go ahead and double click on it. @1 should open by default inside Photoshop, at which point you're probably going to get this missing fonts warning that's telling you that some of the fonts that I used are not available on your system. And you can actually see the text layers that it's talking about here inside the layers panel. Notice that we have these two T's right here. Those are text layers with these little yellow caution icons, which means we have font problems. Now, if you see this, go ahead and click Next. In another program, you would have to figure out how to resolve all these missing fonts. You would have to take all the type that's set in Burqa, for example, and switch it to a different font. In Photoshop, you don't have to. All you want to do is click on the Don't Resolve button, and then I'll go ahead and switch to my zoom tool down here at the bottom of the toolbox. And now I'll go ahead and click on the words one-on-one a few times until I'm seeing the text at the 100% view size. Notice up here in the title tab, we're seeing 100%. And yet this text is looking great. So notice right there, if I turn off that layer one-on-one, that goes ahead and turns off that layer on screen as well. And if I turn it on, it comes right back. So even though the font is missing, it appears absolutely smooth on screen. And that's because, unlike other programs, Photoshop goes ahead and saves a pixel-based version of every text layer you create. You only need the font if you intend to edit the text, which I will not be doing. And so that's it. That's how you open an image file inside Photoshop just by double-clicking on its thumbnail at the Macintosh Finder.